So I've been watching this show In Another World with my smartphone from like 2017. I remember it being quite controversial at the time because during that time, isekai anime was becoming more and more prominent, and people, particularly fans of other genres, of course, were complaining about this quite a lot because they did not want the genres that they like and the kinds of stories that they like to be less represented. Obviously, it's going to be difficult when you see a type of story that you're not a huge fan of become more and more prominent. Uh, and so this was a big part of the discourse at the time. On the one hand, you had the people who I guess were sort of branded as like consumers of slop, which fair enough, who were more in the mainstream or maybe outside of the like niche of anime discussion on the internet, let's say. And those people were pretty universally made fun of in anime discussion forums. But now I think there seems to be more of an acceptance of isekai stories, more of like, I don't know, like a reverence for them almost among the otaku fandom, even like the hardcore fandom, where, weird people like me might discuss anime. I see it more and more as being more and more acceptable to be a fan of this type of show, which is interesting. It's interesting how that change occurred over time. I think to some extent it makes sense because if you compare this to when the moe boom happened, everybody complained about moe more or less. There were people kind of on the fringes. Maybe they were in the mainstream of anime in the sense that like there was a lot of them. There were a lot of them, but uh, they weren't really in the discussions. Like they had maybe a place where they discussed their things, but in terms of the hardcore fandom on the forums, etc., uh, the type of person who liked these shows was pretty widely ridiculed. Like this was viewed as almost like a universal opinion. This kind of show is bad, etc. And then, of course, the tables turned. Higher and higher quality moe shows ended up coming out, and moreover, people became accustomed to the kinds of things that happen in those shows. I also happen to like those shows, and I became someone who liked those shows after initially being pretty resistant to them myself because I tend to like, giant robots. I tend to like, you know, shows like Ashita no Joe where it's really slow and there's kind of a mature storyline and this sort of thing. I came to learn that I also happen to really like moe shows. And of course, there was a certain YouTuber that will not be named in this video that played a big role in kind of introducing me to more of those shows, but in the end, I ended up where I did. And now I'm sort of seeing myself kind of, not really, but sort of come around to isekai. And I say this because I really don't like fantasy settings. Like, even a really good show, like Log Horizon, for example, I could not really enjoy all that much simply because of the setting. Like, I don't know what it is, but fantasy settings just don't agree with me very much. And yet, I have been watching this relatively mediocre, nothing spectacular about it, certainly not terrible, but nothing spectacular about it type show in the form of In Another World with my smartphone. And I have been thoroughly entertained. The characters are nothing to write home about. The premise is fun, but it's not anything crazy. It begins in a pretty compelling way because the show literally starts with your typical isekai character having a conversation with God. You know that thing that happens in isekai shows where you're walking across the street or whatever, then you suddenly get hit by a car and oh wow, you're transported to another world. Well, in this case, we have a Chico, we have a young man that is that has been able to skip all of that. There's no scene where he's getting hit by a car and miraculously ends up somewhere else. Instead, he is having a conversation literally with God, who in theory would be in charge of all of this uh, in a world that made sense. And he's basically just like, yeah, this is my life now, I guess. He's in typical stoic isekai character fashion. He's unaffected, but not in a way that is like overtly unbelievable. More so in a way where it's like, oh, okay, like this is a funny guy right here. Um, I feel like these shows oftentimes take themselves too seriously or like try to make the main guy this super cool guy that's like edgy and unaffected or whatever. And yeah, he embodies that trope of being unaffected, but it's not in like such an overt, like this is in your face kind of way. They're having fun with it, you know? So he's just like, no, like being dead, it happens, right? That's life. And God is like, okay, I'm gonna do you a favor. And he's like, I don't really know what I want. But he's like, come on, any favor. And he's like, I want to bring my smartphone to the other world that you're going to send me to. I need my smartphone with me. And and God's like, okay, you're not going to be able to call your friends or anyone you know on the outside from the old world, but it will have functionality in this one. Oh, and by the way, I'm going to give you Google Maps in this new world that you're going to. And so, of course, immediately, this is like his OP superpower. This is like the thing that makes him the baddest dude on the planet. He has a smartphone in a world where smartphones do not exist. Hence the title, In Another World with My Smartphone. And of course, he is very overpowered. They throw those rocks at him that contain the magical abilities, the water powers, the earth powers, all this typical high fantasy stuff that I'm not a big fan of, but whatever. Um, and of course, when the other characters in the story try to use these stones, they just eke out a little bit of power, or not all of them are compatible with their genes or whatever. It seems that in this world it's like determined at birth how well you utilize these stones. Not only is he able to utilize all of them, he can do so exceptionally well. His power far exceeds everybody else in the world. And on top of that, he has a smartphone. And so what ensues is this kind of odd, uh, really honestly mediocre story that has this charm. It has this charm where you can't help but kind of, even if they're not deliberately trying to, feel as though the story is poking fun at, or at least having fun with, all of these different isekai tropes. Dying, going to another world. What if you just had a conversation with God before ending up in that situation? You know, what if in this world something as absurd as having your smartphone were to occur? Now, this isn't like that one show where they're all like reincarnated as appliances. I kind of forget the name of it now. I did like it even though the animation in that show was really bad. I wish I remembered what the name is. It's probably on my mal somewhere. But it's not like that show. Like that show is just full on absurd. Like it is an exercise in the theater of the absurd. Pretty good. but that's not what I'm talking about today. In Another World with my smartphone is more bland, or less overtly silly, but it is silly, and that's why it's fun to watch. Or rather, that is why I am having fun watching it, and I can't wait to watch more. I am specifically watching this show with Spanish subtitles, and I'm very happy because I am able very easily to understand all of the words that I'm reading, and it kind of makes the experience of watching the show when it does get a little bit more boring more fun for me because I'm reviewing vocabulary and I am improving my abilities through exposure, through mass reading, as some might say. But needless to say, very fun show. Not exactly top of the line, possibly not even good, but I happen to like it, which means that it is good.